Hello there, and welcome back to Little Bear Games. I'm Josh.
I'm Andy.
And today we're going into a rather unpleasant topic, I'd say. We're looking at games that have made us toxic. It should be quite an interesting one, quite an illuminating one, and speaking personally, I think it'll be a form of therapy, to be honest with you.
I agree with that. I think this will be good for us. So we talked about doing it, and hopefully we can reflect on what makes us toxic and try and avoid it in future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think focusing on, I suppose, our triggers in board games in a way will be quite helpful moving forward. And hopefully the listeners will get a bit of a laugh out of hearing what petulant children we can be occasionally.
A lot of the time.
So before we delve into the, I suppose, deepest held skeletons in our closets, it's probably worth just giving a little plug to start with. Thank you so much to everyone who's been following us, listening to us, sharing our content and tuning in.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Dave. Thank you. But yeah, no, we just want to say thank you so much for your support with us, and obviously we really, really appreciate it. And if you can find the time to download our episodes, follow us on Spotify and share our content, we'd be really, really grateful.
We'll be over the moon. Also on social media. So we have an Instagram page set up.
Yeah, absolutely. At Little Bear Games Insta, please give us a follow. And yeah, again, if you can share our content, we'd be very, very grateful.
Much appreciated.
That's the shameless little plug over with.
Yes.
So, Andy, do you want to kick us off? I mean, I feel like I'm the real benchmark when it comes to toxicity in our gaming group. So
yeah,
I think let's start with the appetizer, and then we'll move on to the main course.
Nice. I think you're the main course and the dessert, to be honest.
I'm the whole buffet.
You are the whole buffet. Yeah, you're right. I am just the appetizer. I mean, we all have our elements of getting toxic at times, and there'll be different reasons for doing it. It's just that you happen to do it more than the rest of us.
And I should say, just to jump in there, thankfully, none of us are guilty of table flipping, physical assaults, arson, anything like that.
No, none of us are guilty of this, and I don't think we ever will be. It's more of a frown on the face, a little bit upset, don't speak to you for 30 seconds, those kind of toxic moments. Or maybe a not a good night kiss to a partner that night, you know. Sad, but we do make up, I promise you. I do promise you that we make up. My first game where I can tend to be a little bit toxic is Cosmic Encounter. We had gone away on a board game trip. For anyone that saw our Josh's put up a recent Instagram post showing off his board game collection, and right at the end of that, you'll see a little 3D printed meeple, which was his trophy for winning that weekend. Just as a side note, Cosmic Encounter we played with a couple of newbies that had never played before, and in fact, I think it was even one of them that had never really played board games before this weekend. I can't remember.
Yeah, and it really helps our listeners empathise with you when you're calling them newbies.
Yes, yeah, goddamn noobs. Cosmic Encounter is a strategy board game where you play to take on different alien species. You refer to it as an asymmetric game. The aliens have different powers.
Yeah.
So that for me is one reason why I can potentially be driven to toxicity if I end up with an alien that doesn't have very good powers. Because there's so many, I've never played all of them, and I try and play different ones. And if I end up with one that's not very good, I can feel my blood start to, I wouldn't say boil, but warm tepidly, And the idea is that you can build allies within the game when you are essentially trying to capture another player's planets. Is that right?
Yeah, you're essentially trying to colonize different worlds, aren't you?
That's
and I think it's first 6. So you've got cards in your hand and actual little miniature spaceships and planets. And the idea is you're going out and trying to sort of colonize different worlds and stuff.
Yeah, so it heavily relies on that forming and breaking of alliances, really. And it's the breaking of alliances on the one occasion that we played this in Fishguard that truly upset me, because it was a complete noob to the game And I guess the bit that made me quite upset was just that he'd cottoned onto the strategy quite quickly. If I agree to do something and back out, that's going to leave me in a very terrible position, setting himself up in a bit of a disadvantage, because I think he may have lost some ships along the way. But did he end up winning that game?
Either he did or I did.
Yeah,
I can't quite remember.
I don't know if there was a little bit of king making involved in that.
Yeah, potentially.
Quite possibly.
That's normally how I win.
And king making could be another reason to get quite frustrated. And I wasn't going to flip the board by any shape of the imagination, but I do remember sort of walking away and having to have a moment to myself. And it's okay. You'll get over this. These people have never played this before, and once again, as I said time and time again, I tend to be terrible at board games. And when a newbie plays a board game and then kicks my ass, that's even more frustrating and can make me more toxic. It's like, how is it I play board games, you don't, and I'm terrible. Like, and you've just picked up the strategy, and yeah, I don't think actually we've played it since, if I'm honest.
No, I don't think we have. And that's kind of a crime, because Cosmic Encounters is excellent.
Well, you say that, but you sold your copy.
Oh, no, I gave it to charity and gave you the expansion.
You did give me the expansion, and we can play it seeing as I have a copy, so I'll let you off.
Yeah, I had to make shelf space.
Yeah, no, true.
No, I do remember that evening, and it is quite an interesting one, because negotiation's such a heavy part of Cosmic Encounter.
Yes.
And as you say, that forming and breaking of alliances. And I do enjoy it because it's so loose, but it definitely leaves room for saltiness. And just kind of go back to what you were saying a minute ago about king making, I think it's just important to explain for people who aren't quite sure what that means. Essentially, king making's a concept in board games or tabletop gaming where one player finds himself at the point where they have no hope of winning and they're effectively out of the game.
Yeah. But
they can do something or multiple things to very much impact who wins out the remaining players.
Yes.
And yeah, I've definitely been frustrated quite a few times at king making. Magic, like Commander games, that tends to happen quite a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, Cosmic Encounters, that can definitely play out that way.
Yeah, I guess the things I'm covering with the Cosmic Encounter that can make somebody like myself a little bit have a toxic moment is that forming of alliances and breaking of alliances that can cause a bit of bad blood, albeit it's just a game and we don't mean anything serious by it. But then also the element of king making can be brought into that game. And it's those elements in Cosmic Encounter that have made me personally a little bit toxic, towards the end of the game and maybe even for 20 minutes after. So yeah, just look out for, you'll spot a couple of key features as we go along games. It will be certain sort of mechanics and ways people play that can frustrate me.
And it's funny as well, because I think you and I have both, I can think it's not on my list at all, but I can think of one scenario where I got quite toxic over Cosmic Encounter, and it was for a very different reason.
Okay.
And that was because I'd drawn the Gambler. I want to say they're called the Gambler species as my race for the game. And they had a really cool mechanic, which was you could bet on certain cards being in player's hand, and then you could bluff about what was in no, I'm mistaken. You could bluff about what was in your hand. You could claim you had something, someone had to guess whether you had it or not, and then you'd get a certain bonus for successfully bluffing if you pulled it off. Now, I remember Jazz had a different species. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a big eyeball looking thing. What Jazz was effectively able to do was once every round look at another player's hand and see what was in it.
Okay.
And so Jazz just kept picking on me.
That's right.
And then she was able to tell everyone else playing that I was lying or not.
Right.
And she had no kind of reason to lie about what was in my hand.
Yeah.
So I was effectively neutralised for the entire game.
That wiped your ability out, didn't it? And I suppose that comes onto another sort of mechanic of asymmetric games. You have aliens, in this case, with different abilities that can frustrate you because you pick something that you thought was quite useful. And then, I guess through fortune, Jazz had happened to pick one that wiped out that ability, which was quite frustrating. So yeah, Cosmic Encounters, great game, but has made me a little toxic in the past.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to stress that it is excellent. We're talking about our negative stories around it now.
Yes.
But they are few and far between. The game itself is brilliant, and the randomness and weirdness of it and the looseness is kind of what's great about it. 100%. So it's almost like anything can happen.
Yes. Okay, moving on to your game.
So my first one I'm going to talk about, and I hope my mum's not listening to this one, is Kamigami Battles.
Okay.
So, and I can see you giggling. I'm not going to say on the podcast what we call it.
Okay, fine. Okay.
So, in short, Kamigami Battles is a game I picked up at the 2023 UK Board Game Expo.
Oh, okay.
So I got it from the Japanime stall, and they have a lot of various card games that have their origins in Japan. So lots of kind of anime, manga sort of characters and so on. And I'd been wanting to get into a sort of anime-inspired trading card game for quite a while, because I've sort of been and gone with Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm kind of past that now. Not that I think it's a bad game or judge it in any way, because there's a lot of hatred out there for it, surprisingly. But it's just not on my radar much anymore. But I've heard about some really cool ones like Card Fight Vanguard, Shadowverse, and a few others. And I saw this and initially thought it was a trading card game, but it's not. It's a deck building sort of living card game. So it's sort of buy expansions for it that have all the same cards in and so on. And it's very similar to something like Star Realms, which we mentioned on the deck building podcast. It's just central card market, buying cards out the middle and then dueling each other. And you can play anywhere from 2 to 4 players. And you take on the role of different mythical gods and goddesses. And obviously that drew me in right away. So the core pack I got was Greek mythology and Norse mythology. So I could be playing as Thor, you could be playing as Zeus, and then we battle each other.
Okay.
And yeah, it's really simple, really straightforward. Buy cards from market, play cards, and they can either generate you more money, they can attack other people, or have all these kind of different effects on them. So draw more cards, take a card out your discard pile, put it on top of your deck. This thing can attack twice, those sorts of things. And there's a cool little colour mechanism to it, where if you play cards with complementary colours on them, then you can chain together longer turns.
Okay.
So it's
got symbols also. I ask as a colourblind guy.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's colorblind friendly. So you can. It's got one of those kind of action increase mechanics, like in Flesh and Blood, Dominion, all that sort of stuff as well. So the reason I said I hope my mum's not listening is a lot of the characters are very voluptuous women.
Okay.
So I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not going to say any more than that. And my mum is never going to see that ball game on my shelf, because I'll hide it if she ever comes around. And I certainly won't be bringing it home for Christmas.
Yes.
I won't be able to control my dad. I don't. But the reason I got toxic over this game isn't because I'm a prude or anything like that. No. It's because I played it once with Jazz Nowby, and I felt very picked on.
Okay.
And that's very easy for me. I often feel picked on when I play board games. But I think it was quite late in the evening and I was a bit tired, and I've been really looking forward to playing this game all day. And then it was similar stories to one you've referenced before on the podcast, when we went to Mumbles and you got taken out pretty much immediately in Magic.
Magic, yeah.
Like, you have about 20 life for each of the characters, and I was on, I think, 9 by turn 3 or something like that. And I was knocked out very, very quickly and ended up just kind of watching Jazz Nowby duel each other for 20 minutes. And I just remember getting really sort of grumpy because Jazz had all this damage in her hand that she could swing out with, and she picked me. And I got into this whole kind of like, you're picking on me because I'm your husband, and you don't feel as bad about swinging all that at me. And I got really, well, of course it's coming at me, kind of thing. And she was like, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to just sit here and not play and stuff? And it was a really fair point, and that really stuck with me. But I was so toxic and grumpy. Well, I got knocked out. It's like, well, there we go then. And
I've got to see her as a spectator now.
Well, exactly. And actually, you know what? What I did, which is horrendous, I tried to king make. because I knew I was going out. So I swung back at Jazz with everything I had.
Interesting.
Even if it wasn't optimal,
Okay.
I was just going after her.
Yes.
I think, actually, to her credit, she won from what I remember.
Okay.
I think she sort of bounced back after I was knocked out and beat Albie, but it was quite close. But yeah, that was a real toxic one for me. I think just feeling slightly kind of picked on.
Yes.
And the predictability is what kind of got to me. I was like, well, of course you're swinging at me.
There's probably going to be a theme here where partners are involved and partners will pick on partners. But likewise, they will also then tend to gang up. So it works both ways. It depends on the game, right? You're either going to have your partner backing you, and then the two of you can go on and win a game. But more than likely, your partner's going to choose you as the one that they're going to swing at, do some damage to, because it's far easier to do that to your partner than it is somebody you see far less often. Yeah,
I think it's a fair point. I do think, to a certain extent, different games and mechanics sort of, what's the word, dictate that.
Yeah.
So, for example, something like Blood on the Clock Tower, Werewolf, like social deduction games, I think having your partner, wife, significant other, what have you, on your side in those is very useful.
Yes.
Because you know how each other behave, how you act, how you speak. It's very easy to kind of confide in them and come up with little tells or hidden signals or whatever, or in-jokes, if you will.
Yeah.
Whereas, something that's a bit more aggressive, I find tends to demonstrate the opposite.
Yeah, and we'll probably explore this in a few of our other games that we're going to mention. And if it's okay with you, I'll move on to my number 2.
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
My number 2 is Stone Age, which is a game that I'm very, very fond of. And the only toxic moment that I can remember was the first time I actually played it. This time it was more of who I was playing it with and some of the mechanics in the game rather than some of the other points that we're talking about. But for those that don't know, Stone Age is a worker placement game set in a prehistoric era where players will collect resources and develop tools and build civilizations. And you can end up in some quite intense competitive disputes over resources because you're limited by the number of meeple you can put on certain spaces. So if you're collecting wood, for example, which is the cheapest thing to collect in the game, I think there are 7 spaces. So if you put all 7 meeple, now you start off with 5, but one of the things you can do within the board game is have 2 meeple go into a hut and create a third. Ask your mum about the birds and the bees. And so you can increase the number of people meeple that you have up till 10, and if you have a lot, then you can basically take over a whole resource. So that started to happen quite a bit in the game that I was playing with one of the chaps that I used to live with, and the guy who introduced me to this game, and that started to frustrate me, and I guess rightly so. And this is me being very, very toxic with the game. Would want me to call out exactly what I was rolling for. So at the end of everybody's turn, you then start to collect your resources, and you'll put the number of dice into your little leather cup that comes in the game, which is just really, really cool. And you'll roll, but I suppose you're supposed to call out what you're rolling for so everybody knows. But there was an element of, we all knew each other very well, and I think we should have trusted each other when we were playing the game. So I would just roll and start to collect my wood. And I would start to get responses. Well, you need to call out what So there was a little bit of frustration from him that frustrated me and started to make me really, really toxic. And again, it wasn't a board flip moment, but I do remember not helping to pack up the game at the end of it and just kind of walking away and going to bed that night. So, slap on the wrist to me. I should know better. It is a really fun game, and there are other ways that you can frustrate players. Resource hogging is one. Another way that you will play the game is you need to put meeple on. As I've alluded to, you can create other meeple. There's agriculture, so you need to create food.
Yeah.
And there are tools, which I never tend to go for. I never go for the tools, and maybe that's why I don't win that game as often as I'd like to. There are cards that you can collect that run down the river. And if people put their meeple on the card that you want, that can start to frustrate you. And again, it's something that shouldn't really bother you. It's gameplay. But I find with a game that I like a lot and want to win at, because I enjoy it so much. When people do cheat me out of a resource that I want or a card that I want, that's just screwing with the strategy in my head, and the frustration builds, and then I can ultimately be rude to people around the table, or just not talk to them, or just not be as friendly. This is therapy. Jesus.
Yeah, it's good. Isn't it?
It's good. It's good. It's one that we should play way more often. Have you ever found yourself frustrated with Stone Age?
No, I haven't.
I know it's a game that you like, isn't it?
Yeah, I really like it. And it's funny, a couple of episodes ago, you mentioned that losing badly at a game can make you dislike it, but winning it doesn't necessarily make you like
Love it, yeah.
And I think that was a really, really good point. And Stone Age is a good example of that for me, because I've never won a game of Stone Age, but I still really like it.
Good.
Which for me, that's pretty rare.
Yeah, that is. that is. I've never seen. In fact, I think thinking about it, it's one game I've never seen you be any shape of toxic, disappointed, or I think it's one of those that you've just accepted. People take it in turns, and if somebody's beaten you to a resource, well, that's just the game. Yeah,
and I think in a way, part of the reason I've not won a game of Stone Age, so I tend to stick with one thing and go for it.
Yeah,
most of the time I'll have a plan B if someone takes that space before me, but I think it's just one of those games where you should kind of move around the board a bit and place workers in different spots each time and not get too set in your ways. I have got very toxic over a different worker placement at some point. It might have been Pillars of the Earth. It's a very similar game to Stone Age. And I just remember playing a game once where, as you know, like for me, I'll sit there on other people's turns and sort of go quite quiet and figure out the next several things I need to do when it comes around to me.
Yeah.
And I just remember once Jazz just doing everything I was going to do.
Okay.
And in turn order-wise, she was to my right or whatever.
Yeah.
So kept going ahead of me. And literally just space for space was taking everything I was going to do.
That you had planned to do.
And I think it was Pillars of the Earth off the top of my head, but I can't quite recall. But that's the only time where I've been a bit like, oh my God, really? You're
yes.
Again?
Yeah.
But no, Stone Age, I don't know why. I like the theme. I like how easy it is. And it's always been one we've played early morning, cup of coffee, nice and relaxed. I've never really got edgy over it. And that's why I'm quite surprised to hear you say that. I mean, beyond the kind of not helping pack away the board, how did your toxicity kind of manifest itself within the game? Because normally when I've seen you get a little bit on edge, and to be entirely fair, you referenced this not too long ago when we were talking about Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And you were saying you got a bit frustrated towards the end, and I could tell that because you tend to go like more quiet.
Yeah.
How did it kind of present in this situation with Stone Age?
It's interesting. I think it's one of those games that you can't easily kingmake with. So I don't remember trying to kingmake or anything like that, although that's a tactic I don't try, and I don't think that features too much in my toxicity. I do remember going quiet, and I think I just remember giving up and just thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to place my meeple here, and I'm not going to worry about collecting points or anything like that. It was more of and I have done this a number of times, and it is just fine, I'm just going to give up. I'm not going to play it. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be present, because walking away from a board game, which I have done once in my life, actually, that's just sprung to mind. I think that was Cluedo, though, and it was a very long time ago. And that was almost a board flip moment. Again, I didn't do it, but there you go. I think it was just a giving up factor. I'm here because I need to be here to continue the game for you two. If I was really toxic, I'll get up and walk away. Having thought about that, and actually one of the other frustrating things that I think you have got frustrated with before at the game, and it hasn't really been toxic other than you might say, come on, is you can get analysis paralysis a little bit with Stone Age, and you can overthink what you're trying to do, and people can take a little bit longer in their turn. And I think at times both you and I have kind of gone, oh come on, guys. It's like, this isn't, this doesn't need to be a slow game. Don't overthink it. Place your meeple, You've had my go, Josh's go, Jodie's go, and now it's your go, and you're still taking your time. So that can be another frustrating thing.
So you're exclusively speaking to Jazz there.
Oh, I was. Jazz, I'm not picking on you, I promise.
We definitely are.
I feel like I'm being toxic now in this moment. I'm really not.
You know what? She wanted this shout out. So Jazz and Sen.
Yes.
Yesenia Tanner.
Yes.
You know, our dearly beloved Sen, but she's very guilty of that as well.
She is very guilty of that. She, in all fairness to Yesenia, though, she used to be on her phone a lot. We've we've taken her aside. We've had a word.
Wearing black coats.
We've had an intervention, and she's great at not getting her phone out now during a board game moment. Maybe we need to have board gaming etiquette as an episode title.
Well, I was thinking of doing that, but yeah.
Yesenia, you would feature highly in that. Maybe we could have you on as a special guest.
Bring her on.
Yeah,
Get a counter argument. It'd be great.
That's a good idea. We need both sides of the argument. Maybe we need that with this.
No, but you are absolutely right in terms of the, I suppose, wheel, if you like, of games. That's something that can make me a bit, on edge, I suppose. I can't recall doing it much for Stone Age, to be honest. That's not me trying to be evasive, but usually it's deck builders, funnily enough, for me. And we've spoken about those last time, so I don't want to go on the whole tangent. But where you or I generally will sit and plan our next move and look at what's in our hand while the table's going around, I do get a bit frustrated when it comes to the next person along or whatever, and that's the first time they've looked at their cards, and it makes their turn take 2 or 3 extra minutes when everyone else is just kind of, it comes around to them and they just do it kind of immediately. Yes. Particularly if there's no player interaction. Yeah. And you're just thinking about what you're doing, and no one can affect what you're doing.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And I guess that sort of on that, we're kind of reflecting on us as people. So although we're saying that frustrates us, you and I think both agree that this is part of our therapy, and we need to reflect on that and maybe just understand that not everybody is into the game as we are when we're playing a board game.
Well, maybe they shouldn't be there.
So it's a good point.
My second game is going to be the Barracks Emperors.
Okay.
So I won't spend too long on this one because I don't think there's a huge amount to say because we've only played it once.
Yes.
And it's a game I got at Christmas last year, and it's a really, I think it's a very cool game.
I like it.
And it's essentially a trick-taking game based around the 3rd century crisis in Rome. So
nerding out again.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. And one of my favourite emperors, Diocletian, appears in it. And he was great. He was an old man when he became an emperor. Rome was going through this horrible crisis on almost every level, economic, social, cultural, what have you. And he basically rocks up, solves it, and then retires to go and grow cabbages in Croatia.
Nice.
And that was his whole thing.
Okay.
Rocked off to go and make some cabbages. And I saw there was a kind of trick-taking, very aggressive game by GMT, who I love, as you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, I have to have it. And we played it one afternoon, and it went on for a very long time. And we finished it, but we didn't finish it. We played 1 round, and it's supposed to be 3 rounds, and that took us a couple hours. But essentially, you've got a big kind of grid board with various emperors dotted around on it. And the idea is you're trying to win influence over them. So each player sits at a different end of the board and plays numbered cards that may have some additional effect on them to one side of these emperors. And essentially, once an emperor is completely surrounded, top, down, left and right, you then resolve that emperor. And for the most part, the highest number of the same colour as the emperor wins that emperor. And there's all kinds of other cards, and there's barbarians you can move around to block spaces and that kind of stuff. And I think what was interesting about that is I was toxic in that, but everyone who played that game was toxic.
Yeah, as you reminded me, is just before we started the podcast, that we were actually all quite toxic in this game.
And I think that was the nature of that game.
Okay.
I think that game is very aggressive and it's very tight. There's very few moves you can make in that game that don't do something horrible to someone else. And I think if I played it again, I would go in with a very different mindset.
Okay.
And I wouldn't expect to win. And I would make everyone aware that it is a very aggressive game. And it's very hard to do something without really, really kind of being detrimental to someone else.
If I remember rightly, every time you play a card to an emperor, you're actually then trying to remember the board design. You're playing that card number and you're playing it to other players' sides on other emperors. So you're kind of blocking other emperors for them, aren't you? And that's just the design of the game. That isn't you going, I'm intentionally blocking you by placing a card, unless it's around the edge of the board, if I remember. You kind of are blocking someone else's chance at an emperor. But you're doing that repeatedly. Every time someone's playing a card, they're kind of doing that, right?
Yeah, and you could even play barbarians to other players' sides of the board.
That's right.
So it just forced, the game just gets progressively tighter and tighter and nastier and nastier.
Yeah.
And you can use a lot of effort trying to make sure you win a certain emperor just to have it totally...
backfire.
Well, stolen from you at the last minute.
Yeah.
And there's an even nastier part of the game, which is that if you play 2 cards of the same number, doesn't matter if they're different colours, if they're played to an emperor, they get removed when the scoring goes. So you could have 2 10s and then they'll go, and then the person with the number 3 on it could win the emperor. So that adds another level of frustration. It also enables people to do someone over. So if they don't want someone to win a certain emperor, they'll play the card that's the same number as the one they've played to an emperor.
Yeah.
So then it neutralizes them. So it's super aggressive, super nasty. And I think I just wasn't necessarily ready for that. I wasn't expecting it. And I've got no real standout story. It's not like Kamigami Battles where I can recall kind of being like, oh, why are you picking on me? Why are you doing this? It was just an ill feeling. Everyone was getting quiet. I remember, said something to Jodie about, why are you doing that? If Jodie was going to do something horrible to me, and then you were saying like, well, don't do that, put it somewhere else.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
And then I was getting all kind of like, oh, cheers, that kind of stuff. And I think even Jazz was. It really brought out the worst in all of us, that game.
I think it's a game that we're going to struggle to bring out in front of certainly the girls again, because they'll probably remember that. And it was a long game. And I tend to find with the girls that if it's a long game, they get put off by it. I mentioned Talisman when they were here last night and said, we need to all play that again. It was fun. And it was kind of wasn't that a really long game? And then it was but it was the square. Oh, I actually really enjoyed that game. When you started talking to them a bit more about it, they enjoyed it, which is good, because I want to play Talisman again. And I've got Star Wars Talisman to play, that'll be fun. So yeah, I think that game will be very difficult to bring out in front of the girls.
We'll bring it out in front of Albie. He's evil.
Yeah,
it.
He'll enjoy that. That's very true.
But the that is an interesting point about longer games as well. Because Jazz recently played Botany, which got off Kickstarter. Well, she and I played it and we both really enjoyed it. And that was 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And the other day she came up to me, was like, oh, can we play Botany again?
Nice.
I do think it does depend on the theme, how the game goes, all that sort of stuff as well.
Botany is very much her theme kind of game though, isn't it? Yeah. Nice. Okay.
What's your next one?
So my number 3 and last one on the list is One Night Werewolf, which is a game that we've mentioned before, and I can kind of wrap up One Night Werewolf into any kind of social deduction game, although we've probably had it more One Night Werewolf than the likes of Blood on the Clock Tower. One Night Werewolf is, at its core, involves lying and accusing others. So you're going to take on a role. You're either essentially going to be a villager or a werewolf. And over the course of one night, you are trying to determine who the werewolves are. And if you're on the werewolf side, you're trying to make people believe that you're a villager. So there's lots of lying that goes on. Going back to, because you made me think about this when we were talking about partners and whether they're advantageous to sort of fight against you. I remember one of the first times we played this, and I wasn't very good at lying, and I think my lips started to quiver, and Jodie picked up on it immediately, burst into laughter, pointed at me, going, your lips quivering, you're definitely lying. And she was right. I think I still managed to convince everyone else, though, that I wasn't, so I was proud in that moment. But it's one you've mentioned before where you can find that you end up being picked on. And I think being a werewolf game, there are alphas in this game, and there are people that speak a lot louder than other people do, and I'm guilty of that. I can be a lot louder, and I can be a little bit more, I don't want to say convincing, but certainly pushy. And I guess that can make me come across as quite toxic. And likewise, I don't think I've ever felt bullied or picked on but I know other people in this game have. I know Jasmine has certainly felt picked on before, and one of our friends that we no longer see that often, if at all, mentioned that she was picked on, or she felt that Jasmine was picking on her quite a bit. So it's probably why it was on my list of games that I no longer like to play. I find that it can bring out the worst in people, and that's so strange to say, given that we love Blood on the Clock Tower so much. But I think there's more depth to Blood on the Clock Tower. There's more role building, and there are powers that you can use. Whereas this game, you just go into it with a hidden role, and it's 5 minutes. Okay, are you the werewolf? Are you the villager? Did you wake up in the night? And it's just, and then you will see a chink in someone's armor because they've said something that's not quite right, but that's just them tripping on the game, and then you'll just pick on them and you'll just say, right, you're definitely a werewolf, and you're convincing everyone else that they're the werewolf.
I do agree with that assessment, actually, and that's quite interesting, because that's not something I'd necessarily have volunteered coming into recording this.
Yeah.
But I think just listening to you then, I can see that. And for me, I think it's a time frame, as you kind of acknowledged there, the 5 minutes, as opposed to Blood on the Clock Tower, which can be, well, any amount of time.
We usually play that for
whole
hours.
evening, or
for one game as opposed to a 5 minute round.
Yeah, and I suppose Blood on the Clock Tower, you got the chance to cool off a bit in terms of the day, going out and talking to other people.
Yes.
Even just sitting there with your eyes closed at night when stuff's being resolved is a bit different, and takes a lot longer than the nighttime stuff for Werewolf. And I guess that's a really interesting point, is it is more superficial. It's more kind of who can shout the loudest.
Who can shout the loudest, whereas in Blood on the Clock Tower, I feel like you all get a chance to have a voice, whereas because you are limited, the game, I mean, you can house rule it, but the game kind of limits you to a 5 minute. It is just I've got 5 minutes and I need to be the most convincing person. Whereas in Blood on the Clock Tower, the storyteller is kind of controlling that time limit and will hopefully give everybody to have a chance to have their say why they think somebody is an evil character, or why they want to convince somebody that they're not an evil character. And that having your own voice can be quite important in feeling like, okay, I'm not so picked on.
Yeah, and I think the partner thing's interesting. You use that example of Jodie and the lip quivering and stuff. And that can be a double-edged sword as well, because on the one hand, it's super annoying in the hidden role thing.
Yes.
Or even something more innocent, but still bluffing, like cockroach poker.
Yeah.
Where, Jazz can call me out and stuff. And she's like, I know you're lying. And we'll just keep getting it right time after time. And I don't believe I have any physical kind of tells when I'm lying. So for me, that's probably more of a head, getting in my own head sort of thing. But if I had something like lip quivering, or, some people, to be fair, like some people legitimately have like physical tics or tells or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that must be awful, like knowing that someone knows that about you and can just kind of weaponize it in the context of a game.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then it just sort of shuts the game down a little bit. And it's why I understand the girls sometimes get hesitant around decrypto.
Okay.
And why they want to have girls and boys on different teams.
Yes.
And we've seen that before, where in quite a few games, and we're going off on a massive tangent here, but it will come full circle, is like we'd go away and our secret thing would be forest, and we'd start going Fangorn, Ents, that kind of stuff. And they'd go away and talk about nursing stuff.
Yes. You talk about what you know, don't you?
Like in-jokes and stuff.
Yeah,
and it makes it really difficult. And in fact, I remember, just to include another game on this little ramble, Dead Last.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think it was me. It was one of us, because you have to vote on who to kill in that, and you can do it publicly, but they all sat around and went like code 29 or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, in medical terms, has something to do with like blue wire or whatever. And then they all killed the blue player. Yes. It may have been me. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, okay. Yeah. We're playing that way, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how things like that can make us create a little bit of toxicity between us. It's like, well, hang on, you're using in-jokes, we're going to use in-jokes, and it just develops into this whole thing of...
It's a bit tribal.
It does get a bit tribal, doesn't it? Yeah, and so with One Night, I guess going back to One Night Werewolf, it's not so much that I've got one specific story where I have been toxic. I just think we all have at some point been or had some kind of toxic behavior in that, whether it's picking on someone, being picked on. And I guess my toxic behavior with this is just that I don't like the game anymore. I'm not going to play it. If somebody says we want to play One Night Werewolf, I'm like, there's better games to play. Nah, my toxic behavior here is, nah, put that game back on the shelf. It's staying there. It will stay in my collection, I think, because I just think it is a fun game, and it did get me into social deduction games. So it will stay on the shelf, but not one I like picking up that often. What's your last game, Josh?
My last one is a doozy. It's a Dice Hospital.
I don't think I've played this, have I?
No.
No.
I've never offered it.
No, okay. Is that because of this story?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it's an interesting one. It's a worker placement kind of dice drafting / I suppose altering game. You're managing a hospital, and you can play it solo. I think it's 1 to 4 players. And essentially what happens is you've got a modular board at the start of the game, and you get some cards who are your employees. So you can have like cardiologists, microbiologists, administrators, all these people.
This just sounds like Theme Hospital. It sounds like I'll be all over this. Yeah.
It is essentially Theme Hospital, the board game. And the idea is to have the most points and run the best hospital. And at the start of each round, a load of dice get rolled, and they're different coloured dice. You've got red dice that tend to be themed around kind of organy stuff. I believe that's the medical term for it.
Organy, yeah.
Organy ones. Johns Hopkins. I was trying to come up with a clever reference, but it just fell flat on my face. So red tend to be organy. Yellow tend to be quite like horrible stuff, like sort of oncology and urology and stuff like that. And the green tends to be more flu and bacterial kind of stuff. So flu bacterial, or is it virus?
You got to remember our audience, some of them are nurses, so we're going to get a lot of stick for this. Yeah,
please write in and tell us whether the flu is bacterial or viral. Yeah. That'd be great. It would also be nice to get some interaction on the Spotify.
I have a feeling it's viral. Right, Jodie, you can tell me if I'm wrong. It's viral because it's one of those things that you can't give antibiotics for. So antibiotics you give for bacterial stuff. Correct us. Please do. It'll be nice to get some comments on our podcast.
Yeah, and then, do you really know anything about the 3rd century crisis in Rome?
Exactly.
That's going to be my comeback. Yeah. Give us a little stick.
Nice.
I've got the useful knowledge.
Yeah.
No, it's it's an interesting game. So you've got these different coloured dice, and they go into there's actually some really nice deluxe components. So if you had bought the game, you definitely would have gone in.
Oh, okay.
And they're like these little kind of plastic ambulances, and you sit the dice in them, then they drive off to hospital.
Oh, I'm all over that.
But in my edition, it's just little flat cardboard ones that they sit on.
Boring.
Boring and cheap. But the thing is about the dice that's interesting is it's a similar system to Teotihuacan, which I really like, where in that game, your dice are your citizens, and as they get older, they can do more and this kind of stuff. So a level 3 dice isn't as efficient as level 6 dice. Dice Hostel works the same way, but in reverse. So a level 6 dice is perfectly healthy and happy and can be discharged from Hostel. If something ticks below level 1, it dies and it goes to the morgue. And so each round, your dice that are untreated get progressively lower.
Okay.
And so you're trying to manage them and make them healthy. And essentially what you're doing is your workers and nurses, and you put the nurses on the different spaces in your hospital. And say you go to urology, then you might be able to tick a level 1 yellow dice to level 2. But then you've got sort of more general ones. So grey spaces, where if you put a nurse in clinical triage, you could take any dice from level 3 to level 4 and all this kind of stuff. And then throughout the game, you can buy more buildings, or I suppose departments for your hospital. So you can add in all these fancy kind of care areas, anything from kind of a coffee shop all the way up to radiation therapy and stuff like that. And you can hire new specialists in, so you might be able to buy in some specialist super neurologists who can take your red dice from a 1 to a 6 and all this sort of stuff.
It sounds really up my street.
Do you know what? I'm really selling it to myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to play it.
Yeah, I wish you had it here with you today. We'd play it now.
Yeah, come back to mine after. We'll get a game in.
Yeah.
The toxicity.
Yes.
Act 2.
Yes.
It's like,
you've sold it. Now the downfall.
Yeah, it's like one of those Netflix documentaries where it's all happy at the start. Man. It's like, get some ominous music playing. Can we edit that in? Are we at the point of editing in ominous music?
Oh, I don't know if I'm at that stage yet. I'll try. We'll see.
Here we go. I've just
if it's there, I've learnt a new skill. If it's not, Andy's boring.
Yeah. Still sponsor us, someone, please.
Yes, yeah, please do.
HMV.
HMV. I wondered if you were going to mention someone. You've managed to every other episode, so
yeah. There was one I missed a little while ago, and I was really sad.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll make sure that we add it to the segment notes or something.
There we go. If the editing skills, lovely, full circle. Now, so where the toxicity comes in on Dice Hospital is you draft the ambulances to start with.
The little cardboard ones, yeah. Yeah.
So you draft those, and that can be hard anyway because you're working off of random chance because those dice have been rolled to start with. So you can be working with the worst of the worst depending on how the dice have gone. So that could be a little bit frustrating. I also feel it's one of those games that you and I have spoken about this before. It's kind of hard to articulate, but there's certain, particularly worker placement and engine builder games, where no matter what you do, you don't feel anything you're doing is very good. And I feel Dice Hospital is one of those games. I don't know, and please, if you've played it and you're very good at it and you enjoy it, then please let me know and email us at mail@beargames or put it on Spotify or what have you. But yeah, I just found it, nothing I did and the couple of times I played it ever felt like I was doing very well. I always felt like I was clinging on, and maybe there's a really horrible start message there about the state of the NHS, and that I was trying my best with minimal resources and struggling along.
Are you running for the toy buy? No.
We're allowed to have that in there? Is that a political thing?
I don't know. No, we'll edit that out, maybe,
or not, depending on how competent.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just felt nothing felt good. It was very much a struggle, and where I got to with it, and this is one of my most toxic moments in gaming, was Jazz was on like 150 odd points.
She's a nurse. She's going to run this hospital very well.
Yeah, but I'm an ancient historian, and I can still lose at games about Rome and stuff.
Well, what does that say? She's just better at her job than you are.
Wow, this really is therapy, isn't it? This is real therapy. This is really enlightening.
And I think I've turned into a toxic person during the toxic episode. Sorry, Josh.
But she was on like 154 points, and I was on 20, and there was 2 rounds left of the game. And I got very much in the headspace, it sounds like you did with Stone Age, where I gave up. I was like, what's the point? Should we just finish it here? Not really enjoying it.
Yeah.
You're going to win. Well done. That kind of thing. And I realised in retrospect how awful that is. And Jazz was saying, well, no, we can't stop just because you're losing. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not enjoying it. It's, I'm getting absolutely hammered. There's no way I'm going to win. I don't feel like I'm doing very well. All this stuff. And Jazz made me play it out. And I had this ridiculous turn in round 5, and Jazz still won, but the game ended on like 160 to 157 or something. Wow. And I felt awful after it. I was really, really not very nice. I was getting really huffy and kind of like, well, it doesn't matter where I put my nurse. I'll chuck one here, put one there. I'll take that ambulance without looking at it, that kind of thing. And it was really not very pleasant to be around. And then I had this turn, and what was funny was this turn that was so ridiculous in terms of points happened through bit of luck, bit of skill, 15% concentrated power of will.
Yeah.
There's a reference for people. But and it sort of came out of nowhere, and I was doing it, and because I'd been so toxic in the previous round, I wasn't enjoying pulling off this spectacular turn, because I was like, oh, you're an idiot. You've just been really sulky and childish. Yeah. and you're flying, and you should be having a good time. And Jazz was getting annoyed at me for having the good turn.
Okay.
Because she was like, there, see, I told you, you weren't out of it and stuff. And you were all sulky for nothing. And yeah, it's one of the few games I've genuinely come away with. I just went off upstairs and was sort of sat there thinking to myself, that was awful. You really, really can't let games get to you like that. And and I think to kind of segue out of Dice Hospital and towards our kind of final thoughts on toxicity in games and us and stuff. I think that I listened to something a little while ago that I thought was really interesting, talking specifically about toxicity in Warhammer.
Okay.
And thankfully, I think Warhammer, from my understanding, is a very easy game to be toxic in because it's very much luck and dice-based. If you're playing more competitively, it can be very much dictated by the state of the current meta. And the game isn't balanced. Some armies are a hard counter to others. Some aren't very good, like Gene Stealer cults for ages. You had to be very, very good to actually play them well.
Yeah.
And if relative amateurs like us pick them up, we'd just be rubbish with them effectively. And this guy was talking about it, and he said the reason people get so toxic over Warhammer and games is because they put too much of their self-worth into winning that game.
Okay.
And I think that's something that's really stuck with me recently. It's like, why do you care so much about winning this?
Yes.
And I reflect on it a lot. And I don't think it's that I necessarily put too much of my self-worth in it. I think it's that I put too much of how do I put it? I suppose my excitement into it.
Yes.
Like I'll spend all day being like, I can't wait to go and play this with Andy and Elby or Jazz and Jodie or whoever.
Learning the game.
And then if I'm not having a very good time, I'm getting beaten down and losing and that kind of stuff, then I get really I get unnecessarily sulky rather than just enjoying being in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think I do reflect on the times. I think I've got better at it as you and I have played more games. I think there have been times where I think Memoir 44 is a good example of this, where we played it repeatedly. Was it Memoir or was it? No, it might have been Battle Spirit Sagas. Because those are two games that you've beat me repeatedly at 8, 9, 10 times in a row. And I got really annoyed with you at the game to the point that you had noticed and had said something. And you're the kind of person that will say something to me like, are you okay, pal? And I think I'd snap back with, yeah, I'll be all right.
Just stop blowing up my tanks.
Yeah, just stop blowing up my tanks or something. And I'd go away and reflect on it. And I think I've got better at being less toxic. I'm not perfect. I still get annoyed at things, and I'm the same as you. I think you put a certain amount of yourself into the game because you get excited about it, and then when you don't do well at it, that eats away at you a little bit. Well, it certainly does me. I guess I feel personally attacked at myself because I'm not very good at the game,
but then that feeds into what that guy was saying about self-worth and stuff.
Yeah.
Like for me, I don't feel stupid or not very good if I don't win at a game.
Yes.
But for me, it's sewing up that excitement. And I suppose to an extent it is self-worth in terms of my time and energy and excitement. And that's something I'm so looking forward to. But when it doesn't go a plan, then it's just a real difficult one. And I think it's very good to reflect on it. It's something to kind of think about, acknowledge what triggers you into being a bit toxic. So for me, it's very easy to spot common themes like feeling picked on, I suppose, as we alluded to earlier, kind of perceptions of things being unfair in terms of variable powers, very aggressive games. So things where it feels like everything you do is attacking someone or they're attacking you.
Yeah.
For me, it's that kind of stuff. And I think just being aware of that, and I think, I don't know if you'd agree with this, I think personally I've mellowed a bit over time.
I would say so. I say you'd mellowed more, but when you do get frustrated by something, you still will have that, but it doesn't last as long.
No,
I mean, in the early days when it happened, and maybe it was something like that I might have done that upset you. I was really thinking, oh my God, is my friendship over with Josh? Like he's that upset about this, you know? Is the game, we're an hour into our games night. Is it now, are we calling this a night? And obviously playing with you more. So I think not only has it mellowed, we've also learnt that, hey, this is sometimes Josh does this or Andy does that. And, And the girls will be guilty of being toxic at times.
They can be.
Yeah.
I think in slightly different ways.
In different ways, I agree with that.
I think it is quite unique. For me, I can get snide. Snide's like my main thing, like sort of bitey, a bit sulky.
Yes.
And more quiet.
Whereas I back off.
You go properly.
Yeah, I go into my dark corner and just...
The thing is, though, is I think yours is more noticeable because you don't do it as often.
Yeah, so when I do it, it kind of it stands out quite a bit.
Yeah, and I kind of think that's a really good, I suppose, a message that I think is quite important. It'd be nice to kind of draw more to a close with, is there's a real witch hunt around kind of toxicity in board games. And like, if you look at YouTube channels that talk about board games and tabletop gaming, RPGs, all that sort of stuff, then the videos that do well and the channels that are at the very top are the ones that sort of fixate on horror stories and stuff. And I love watching those. I'm not going to sit here and kind of badmouth them. But I think it's kind of two sides to it. I think it's good to acknowledge that toxicity is not a good thing to have in board gaming.
Agreed.
And it's something you need to kind of work on yourself and get better at. And that's something I try and do every time I play.
And what we're reflecting on in this episode, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that honesty is good. Because I'm sure there's lots of kind of podcasters and YouTubers out there and stuff who have a very squeaky clean image, but probably still get a bit like toxic occasionally.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I see Rodney Smith flipping a few tables and giving people a finger and that kind of stuff.
Could you imagine? No, I think he's the Gary Lineker of the board gaming world.
The nice guy.
Yeah. Never got a yellow card kind of thing.
Yeah, but where I was going with that though is, but on the flip side of that, obviously there's levels to it. Like we've already acknowledged, none of us have flipped tables. We don't get violent or be really abusive or nasty or cruel to anyone or spill drinks over people's game, or there are levels to it.
Yeah.
However, I still think if you've got a friend who gets a bit toxic around board games, maybe talk to them about it. Don't almost in a mild kind of intervention-y kind of fashion, be like, when we were playing this, what made you feel that way?
Yes.
Kind of thing, and help them to kind of reflect on it rather than just necessarily ostracizing people or writing a 2,000 word Reddit entry on them or what,
Am I the a-hole?
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. I think that's something you did with me the handful of times that I had sort of reclused, gone inward, and it helped me manage it better the next time round. I'm not saying it fixed me, but it was more. It was far easier to discuss with you the next time. It was just I got frustrated because of this. It's not you. It's not anything you did. It's not you. It's me. That tends to be the discussion. It's a good point. I think being able to talk to your friends is very important.
Perfect. Anything else to add, Andy?
I don't think so. No, just know that this was a really good therapy session for me, and that it is all lighthearted. We're not condoning toxicity in board games in any way, and in fact we're just saying reflect on it and help your friends overcome it and be better people. So
yeah, exactly. I think be better is the kind of mantra for yourself and for your friends. And yeah, it's hopefully on to, I suppose, slightly more jolly pastures for the next episode, but hopefully that's been helpful for some people.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening, and it will be interesting to hear how you guys have changed or what you guys have done different to make yourself less toxic at the board game table. So please do leave us a comment. Email us at mail@beargames.co.uk.
And please feel free to drop us a message on Instagram as well at Little Bear Games Insta. And just kind of, I suppose, second what Andy was saying there, we're still obviously very small and growing in that sense. But if anyone listening to this, any of the stories kind of resonated, or you have a story to share that you'd like us to read out on this, then please feel free to send that to us. We'd be delighted to read it. Cool.
Well, I've been Andy.
I'm Josh.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Before you leave, you must know you are beloved. Before you leave, remember Remember, I